Hi, Bob Kalechman here for Millennium, and I'm here today to honor the men and women who made the supreme sacrifice for World War II and the defending of the Philippines. In particular, the Battle of Bataan Peninsula and the battle for the island of Corregidor in Manila Bay, Philippines. In particular, we'll be honoring the men and women of the fourth Marine Regiment, 2nd and 3rd Battalion. This is the regiment that went to the Philippines from Shanghai, China, and they went up to the naval base in Subic Bay, and they stayed there a while, and then they were sent down to defend the island of Corregidor. But I'd like to give you a background of this of these Marines and the caliber thereof, and in addition to that, to give you a brief history of the 4th Regiment, 2nd Marine Division. The 2nd and 3rd Battalion were more or less activated, and what had happened was they were brought to Shanghai, China, and that was during the volatile days of the Japanese-Chinese War, and the object of the Marine Corps, the 2nd, 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines, 2nd Marine Corps Division, was to protect American property and American lives in China, in Shanghai, China particularly. Now, in addition to being stationed in Shanghai, they were also stationed up in what they call Jiangdao. And at Jiangdao, they also served the purpose of guarding American property and Americans. Now, what had gone on was that they had more or less gone into Shanghai, and they were transferred there in October 1941, and they were sent into China, and they were sent up to, like I say, the Philippines. And they were in Philippines, in Subic Bay, when the Japanese attacked the Philippine Islands, in particular Clark Field, the naval bases, and the army bases. Now, the 4th Marine Regiment fought valiantly. They were eventually forced to surrender on May 6, 1942, under the orders from Major General Jonathan Mayhew Wainwright, the 4th United States Army. If you recall, General Wainwright had been named as the replacement for General MacArthur when General MacArthur left for Australia. And this is the nickname. It wasn't a very good nickname, but Marines, in their songs and also in their reference to General MacArthur, had a reference for him, and they called him Dugout Doug. And the reason for it was he had left his men on Corregidor in the Philippines and gone to Australia, and he named General Wainwright as the commander of all American forces in the Philippines. And he made it right at the end of World War II aboard Missouri. He handed one of the fountain pens that was used to sign the surrender in September 1945 of Japan. He handed one to General Wainwright and the other ones to the British General Archibald. So this is how things had occurred on that infamous day on May 6th. In addition, the 4th Marines had nickname, and the nickname they used, they called themselves the Magnificent Bastards, and it was that was part of it, and they had a tradition, and they adhered to it. They had many streamers, battle streamers, that were added to their colors. And one thing I like to point out to you and make a point of it, when on May 6th, when the Marine Corps were ordered to surrender by the Army, they took the colors, the Marine Corps colors, and they ripped up the flag. Each man got a little piece of it. They broke the staff, the wooden staff they broke up, and they burnt everything. And the Japanese could never show or claim that they ever had taken the colors from the United States Marine Corps, or in particular, the 2nd and 3rd Battalion, 4th Marine Regiment, 2nd Marine Division. Now, as things progressed, I think I like to point out to you the fact that when the Marines left Shanghai, the Marine Corps 4th Marine Band, the last China band, Marine Corps China band, they left with him. And in the tradition of the Marine Corps in those days, all Marines had what they called a campaign hat. It was similar, it was a wide banded hat. The photograph had indicated it, and it had a chin strap. And they wore this as it was a campaign hat, a campaign cap. And as they marched out, the band marched out in full dress. On their pack was that campaign hat. That was the thing that sat right on top of their harvest pack. And they marched out, and as I'm showing you here, there are many photographs of the troops marching, carrying heavy marching orders, packs topped with nearly block campaign hats, armed with the 1903 Springfield rifle, made here in Springfield, Massachusetts, at the left shoulder. Beneath each hat is the standard issue four-weather gear called a poncho and trenching tool. At the head of the column pictured, the 4th Marine Band can be seen playing out into brighter sunlight. This proved to be the false foreboding, as the historic field band would cease to be one in only 10 more days. In other words, all these bandsmen that were in the China 4th Marine Band all become infantrymen. And that's what Marines are trained for. Their basic thing is to be an infantryman. Now, getting back to the Bataan and Corregidor, Philippines. The Philippines laid in their path of the Japanese. The United States had acquired the Philippines during the Guam and Puerto Rico in the Spanish-American War from Spain. And in the war against the U.S., time was Japan's weakness. Lacking in steel and fuel, it could not sustain a long war with the energy and resources-rich United States. It therefore had to strike a fiercely and decisive and could spare no delay for its part. The United States had a military 10% the size of today. The isolationist policy of the 20s and 30s put America's military behind and unprepared for war. Sound familiar? This is the same situation we're entering now. In the 30s and 40s, we had the same situation. And weakness invites aggression. And as long as we maintain a weak military and we keep cutting the Marine Corps, you're going to find the world, and the United States in particular, is going to become more and more in harm's way. And we have to insist that our government and our president, who is commander-in-chief of all the armed forces, maintain a strong military, particularly a strong Marine Corps. The Marines are your firemen. They go out and put the fires out before they become vast. So the war began in the Philippines. There were 30,000 Americans, 25,000 Filipino regular army, and roughly 100,000 Filipino raw volunteers. Another 100,000 Filipinos volunteered to go up against this vast imperial Japanese army with little or no training. This is an ally to keep close to your heart, and it's an ally for the American people to respect forever. The Philippines stayed with us at our weakest hour, and they should be commended for it, and we should support them forever. Now, the situation was very severe, particularly at Clark Field in the Philippines, and the Air Corps, at that time it was the United States Army Air Corps. The Air Corps became supportive infantry. In other words, the Air Force, after Clark Field and the other fields, the Air Force had no equipment. They lost all their planes. And what they did with the personnel was they became supportive infantry for the Army and the Marine Corps. And in addition to that, there were many sailors that became supported infantry. United States naval men became supported infantry. In other words, the Japanese looked upon the naval volunteers or support infantry as kamikaze, as crazy men, because they had dyed their white uniform pink, and they were running through the jungles with a pink uniform. And the Japanese could never figure it out. But that's what happened with many United States naval personnel that lost their ships, and with a lot of United States Army Air Force personnel that lost their planes. They all became supportive infantry. And as such, they were captured. In March, General Douglas MacArthur and his staff had been ordered by President Franklin Roosevelt to flee the Philippines by boat to Australia. And that was the reference that they gave General MacArthur at the time. For that, the Marine Corps referred to him as Dugout Doug. It soon became clear no immediate help was coming. The men soon began to refer to themselves as and they still do, as the battling bastards of Bataan. Shortly afterwards, the surrender of Bataan. And shortly after that, you had the infamous Bataan Death March. And this was a fact where they marched the few Marines that were captured, and mostly Army and Naval personnel. They marched them up to a camp in the north called Camp O'Donnell. And here again, the Filipino people came to the aid of the prisoners of war, the captured Americans. They threw sugar cane to them. They risked their lives by giving them water. They risked their lives by throwing them rice balls. And the Japanese wouldn't hesitate to bayonet a Filipino or bayonet a wounded American. They were very, very uncivilized people, the way they handled our people. And every May 6th and every April 9th, the Japanese government should apologize to these men. And in my opinion, they should pay them for the slave labor that they took out of them. To this day, the Japanese government has not paid one nickel to the survivors of the Bataan Death March, to the survivors of Corregidor, to the survivors of Patan, or for that matter, Manila and the Philippines. They haven't paid them one nickel. Now, the final blow to the defenders came about 9:30 a.m. when 3 Japanese tanks went into action. The men around Denver Battery, that was a howitzer that was in support of the infantry and supported the Marines that were defending Corregidor. And I might add there were Army and there were Filipinos, but the Marine Corps was in charge of the handling of the defending Corregidor. Really, the defenses outside Manila Tunnel could not hold out much longer. The expecting further Japanese landings General Wainwright decided to sacrifice one more day of freedom in exchange for several thousand lives. In a radio message to President Roosevelt, Wainwright said, "There is a limit of human endurance, and that point has been passed." Colonel Howard burned the 4th Regiment. Colonel Howard burned the 4th Regiment and national colors to prevent their capture by the enemy, the Japanese. General Wainwright finally surrendered the Corregidor garrison at 1:30 p.m. on May 6, 1942, with 2 officers. Now, I think I would be remiss if at this time I didn't recite a poem that is more or less very important to the defenders of Bataan and Corregidor and the Death March. And on May 6th, when they celebrate the dastardly act of the Japanese, because we have to remember, these men and women that were captured on Corregidor, after they were captured, they were kept in the sun for 2 weeks with little or no food. Sanitation was terrible. And the Japanese kept them in place in the sun for 2 weeks. Now, there's a dial, and at 12 noon, the sun shines directly on this dial on Corregidor in the Philippines at 12 noon. And in addition to that, the author is unknown, but there's a poem that's more or less on this dial around the Corregidor Monument. Sleep, my sons, your duty done, for freedom's light has come. Sleep in the silent depths of the sea, or in your bed or hollowed soil, until you hear at dawn the low, clear reveille of God. Where Americans and Filipinos were making a stand on Patan, Corregidor, and the southern islands of the Philippines, such resistance would disrupt the Japanese military timetable of conquest of the South Pacific, and they did their job. They gained the valuable time for the United States to recover from the dastardly Japanese. Now, we're going to be celebrating Memorial Day on the 26th of May, and in Simsbury we usually have two parades. We have the Terriffill Parade that kicks off at 9 a.m. in Terriffill, and a 1:30 p.m. in Owensbrook and Hot Meadow. The Simsbury Center Parade will kick off sharp at 1:30 p.m. on the 26th of May. And at that time, we will honor the veterans and men that made the supreme sacrifice. And at this time, I would encourage people to give thanks, because we do have a member, or I'll refer to him as Ambassador of Bataan, Mr. Dan Crowley, a corporal in the United States Army Air Force, who, when he came ashore at Corregidor, they made him a Marine, and he defended Corregidor. And I'd just like to mention this man and give him the respect and the honor that he's deserved and he earned. And I think everybody should give him the honor of being one of the few survivors of Corregidor, Bataan, and the death marches. Now, that more or less concludes the Memorial Day service, and I encourage people to go out and observe Memorial Day. And in my mind, the best way to observe it is to go to the cemetery and decorate the graves of veterans and men and women who have made the supreme sacrifice for their country with an American flag. However, there has been a few things that have come to my attention politically, and I feel now is the time to bring it to your attention, because I don't think many people, if any, know what's going on in our Simsbury, our beloved Simsbury. We have a marijuana facility that will be growing and manufacturing marijuana. For your edification, marijuana is classified as a number 1 drug, dangerous drug. It's classified with heroin, cocaine, the more or less manufactured synthetic drugs, and it's referred to as the number 1 killer. It's classified in that category with the rest of them. This is classified by the Drug Enforcement Administration. And what has been done here, we don't have the proper personnel. In other words, we don't have the the police force in strength to handle this operation. We asked for 2 new policemen, and the budget was presented cutting a policeman. And now we're in a situation where the license and the people that testified to the zoning board, and the zoning board chairman, Robert Pomeroy, and one of the members, David Ryan, pushed this thing along. People were never informed of a hearing. The hearing was held in the dark of night, during a snowstorm, cold. Most people couldn't get out. No, most people didn't even know about it. West Hartford advertised 2 or 3 times, and they ran articles in their newspaper about it. Canton ran articles in their newspaper about it, the Hartford Courant. We didn't run any articles in the Hartford Courant. The argument that the administration will give you, and the appointed administrators, is that, well, we did what we were required to do. They didn't do their job. They allowed a convicted felon to testify to the zoning commission. The convicted felon was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. He was out on appeal. Since then, his appeal has been denied, and he's been told to report to prison. And since then, he's been indicted 33 more times. And this is the type of people we're giving marijuana licenses to. We tell our children not to use it. Say no. Just say no. But what is the town administration doing? We're not doing anything. We haven't had one, and I've requested an investigation of the licensing and the election, because in my mind, my opinion is that a conspiracy existed to grant this license. Because it had to be a conspiracy, because it was done several months before the license was even issued. And now for this we're getting report after report about what's going on. Licenses are being issued to people that are felons, in my opinion. So we have our work cut out for us. Let's honor our veterans on this Memorial Day with special respect to the defenders of the Philippines, in particular the 2nd and 3rd Battalions, 4th Marine Regiment, 2nd Marine Corps Division. God bless.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.